Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into a story today that honestly, it gets so glossed over in standard history classes. We're talking about the Magellan Elcano Expedition of 1519. Now, you might hear that year and probably just think, oh, standard historical voyage, right? But actually, scratch that. What we're really looking at is the absolute greatest, most dangerous gamble in the entire history of navigation. This wasn't just a trip. It was a high-stakes thriller, packed to the brim with mutiny, starvation, sheer human willpower, and, as you'll see, a pretty unbelievable twist ending.
To really wrap our heads around the ambitious scale of this departure, we gotta look at the numbers. 5. Ferdinand Magellan's monumental expedition kicked off with a fleet of 5 distinct ships, the Trinidad, the San Antonio, the Concepcion, the Victoria, and the Santiago. And assembling and outfitting 5 ships for a journey with literally no guaranteed return date? Yeah, that was a massive, massive logistical and financial undertaking for the era.
And filling out the decks of those 5 ships? 270 men. 270 guys embarked on what a lot of people at the time considered to be an absolute death sentence. I mean, these weren't just your standard explorers coasting along well-charted shores. No, they were actively choosing to sail straight off the edges of known geography. They were venturing deep into those massive empty blind spots that existed on literally every single map of the time.
Section 1. A mission into the unknown. Okay, so let's dive into this. Why risk everything? What was the actual motivation behind launching such a massive, precarious expedition in 1519?
Well, the drive was entirely economic. Back in 1519, the world was hungry, and specifically, it was hungry for spices, things we just totally take for granted today in our kitchen cabinets. Spices like cloves and nutmeg, they were literally worth their weight in gold. They were the ultimate luxury commodities. But there was a major geopolitical problem for the Spanish. The established, highly lucrative routes to the Spice Islands were completely locked down and monopolized by their rival Portugal.
Now, what's really fascinating is how this conflict framed the solution. You have the safe, established Portuguese route, right? That meant sailing east, hugging the coast of Africa. And then you have Ferdinand Magellan's radical gamble. He took this pitch directly to the Spanish king and basically said, instead of fighting the Portuguese in the east, why not just sail west? Why not sail straight through the Americas to reach the east? It was a bold, unprecedented pitch just to bypass a monopoly.
Section 2. The breaking point. Because, as you can imagine, the optimism of departure vanished pretty quickly, and the journey almost instantly devolved into an absolute nightmare before it even truly began.
Let's trace this brutal timeline just to see how this builds. Starting from Spain, the crew faced violent mutinies almost right away, and they actually found themselves trapped for months in the freezing, unforgiving cold of Patagonia. Eventually, they found this treacherous, winding nightmare of a passage through the southern tip of South America, what we now know as the Strait of Magellan. And when they finally broke through that terrifying geographical maze, they emerged into a vast expanse of blue water. Magellan was so incredibly stunned by how calm the water was compared to the strait that he named it the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean. From there, they pushed on toward Guam.
But that vast blue expanse, it held a terrifying secret. See, Magellan genuinely thought that once they hit the Pacific, it would just be a short, easy hop over to the Spice Islands. He was completely, fatally wrong. It took them 98 days. Take a second to process that number. 98 agonizing days of sheer, unbroken survival as they just crawled across the largest body of water on the planet, having completely underestimated its true, massive scale.
I really want to slow down here for a second, because it's so hard to fathom the intense claustrophobia and the absolute desperation of the crew during this Pacific crossing. The food ran out. To stay alive, the sailors were forced to consume whatever they could physically chew. We are literally talking about eating sawdust, chewing on the leather from the ship's rigging, and hunting down rats in the hold, just to keep from starving to death.
Section 3. The shocking twist. If you think surviving that crossing was the climax of the story, well, you're in for a surprise. History books frequently gloss over the sudden, violent turn this expedition takes next. So after those months of starvation and endless ocean, in March 1521, they finally hit land in what we now recognize as the Philippines. Reaching the Philippines was this incredible turning point for the surviving crew. I mean, they had crossed the Pacific, but for Magellan himself, choosing to get involved in local, regional politics there meant this would be the absolute end of the line.
We're so used to that typical hero's journey, right? Where the famous leader returns home triumphantly. But reality is often much harsher. Magellan vastly underestimated the local defenses. He led his men into the infamous Battle of Mactan, engaging forces led by Lapu-Lapu, and on April 27, 1521, the man who planned and pitched the greatest voyage in history was killed in the fighting. Magellan never actually finished his own journey.
With the leader dead and the crew completely battered, most expeditions would have instantly turned back, right? They would have cut their losses, tried to retrace their steps, but this is where the real hero of our story steps into the spotlight. Enter Juan Sebastián Elcano. He was a Spanish navigator who stepped up and took command of the fractured mission. His goal wasn't just to retreat and survive. No, he was fiercely determined to finish the job they had started.
Section 4. The Sole Survivor. We are now looking at the final leg of this incredible saga, carried entirely on the splintered wooden decks of one lone ship, the Victoria. Under Elcano's command, the Victoria achieved the impossible. He steered this last remaining ship all the way across the vast Indian Ocean, navigating entirely around the dangerous southern tip of Africa, and finally, on September 6, 1522, a full 3 years after they originally left, the Victoria limped back into port in Spain.
To truly grasp the cost of this expedition, let's recall the numbers from the beginning. They started with 5 ships. In the end, only one managed to return. One single battered vessel survived the entire global gauntlet. And the human cost is even more staggering. Remember, we started with 270 men full of ambition. When the Victoria finally docked in Spain, out of those 270, only 18 men remained. Just 18 starving, broken, but ultimately victorious sailors survived to tell the tale of the entire circumnavigation. It's a deeply tragic, but honestly awe-inspiring bookend to the journey.
Section 5. The True Legacy. So, as we wrap up this incredible story, what is the ultimate takeaway here? I think it teaches us a profound historical lesson. The most important part of any monumental journey isn't necessarily how it starts, or even whose idea it was. It's who possesses the sheer grit to finish it. The crucial point is this. Yes, history often puts Magellan's name on the map and gives him the primary credit. But it was absolutely Elcano's persistence that closed the loop. Those 18 men proved, once and for all, that the globe was fully connected by its oceans. And perhaps most shockingly for the people of 1522, they revealed that the world was incredibly, vastly larger than anyone had previously dared to imagine.
So I want to leave you with a provocative thought today, something to really chew on after understanding the sheer terror and scale of this expedition. Put yourself in the cracked, salt-stained shoes of those sailors for a minute. After enduring the freezing cold of Patagonia, surviving mutiny, and staring out at the endless, completely unmapped Pacific Ocean, would you have turned back, or would you have kept going into the great unknown? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on today's Explainer, and keep exploring.